Now, there are many reflective models that a practitioner, a professional can use and take on board. Um, and I will be the first to confess to you that I did not come to the understanding of reflection until my mid 40s, which is a shame, I would imagine, to me. But thank God, it's not too late. And I then started to understand why a lot of times we have problems in teams, and why, to be sincere with you, culturally, we also have problems in being able to move societies forward, teams and venture teams forward in the way in which we should, because we have failed to actually systematize and acquire systematic approaches to the way in which we reflect. Now, organizations might do this, to be sincere with you, but they do it with a respect with a certain outcome. I'm not going to go into too much detail because, this we can spend literally 2 weeks looking at each of these models and working across them. I have been doing that now for about 2 years and trying to adapt them into a marketing or commercial environment and understanding what this means. But several reflective models exist for the practitioner to use. The thing about it, which we must be careful about, which is that you cannot just go on and use them, because they require added on prisms, and they require certain types of relationships, which might be referred to as critical friendships, to enable that reflector optimize the experience. One of the things that I have been very privileged to do over the last 30 years, or at least 20 years plus in the service industry when I was in agencies, is working with marketing directors, heads of marketing, sales directors, and basically being their partners in the thinking process. And what I then realized when I started to look at these models is to realize the fact that actually that is absolutely correct. My most successful relationships, in terms of me being an agency head who ultimately had to help a sales and marketing director, a CMO, or a head of marketing to achieve results, my most successful relationships were actually those where we were critical friends, where I was a critical friend to the head of marketing. In other words, not a rubber stamp, but where I had the courage to have a horizontal conversation, of course, which challenged the marketing director's thinking. And this is where there is a big problem in the agency world today, because a lot of our younger and middle-level executives have failed to be trained to understand that that is what their responsibility is. Even though the reality is that on the client side of the agenda, marketing leaders need to also start to train their marketing managers to understand that it is that critical friendship, that professional critical friendship that is required. And it's not a master-servant relationship. So to a large extent, part of the reasons why I'm passionate about what I'm doing now is because I think we can help ourselves. I think we can help the next generation of marketing service practitioners to step up their game in being true critical friends to brand managers, marketing managers, and heads of marketing, because they're equipped appropriately to be able to offer the value that great teams, learning organizations require. Why? Because the world is rapidly changing, and it's changing very fast. I'm not going to again spend too much time on this, but basically, let me tell you what is going on, and I will underscore the point very soon. I will underscore the point also very soon. The reality is, for instance, if you look at something just like computing and the movement towards what is referred to as singularity, humans do not realize it now, or might not realize it now, but humans need to step up the game, because a lot of things that humans could do, computing power exponentially moves us into the direction of not requiring humans to be able to do it anymore. It is envisaged or forecasted that by 2045, that computing power will surpass the brain power equivalent to that of all humans combined, human brains combined. 2045, which therefore means that in the ecosystem, we must understand that we're also in an ecosystem with technology, that in today's ecosystem, therefore, what role then will humans play? How then ultimately, right now, the truth of the matter is algorithms are actually ruling a lot of the decisions, particularly in the West, and it's fast approaching also in other parts of the world. For artificial intelligence is made it such that algorithms and AI is now making key decisions, which ultimately or previously were made by human beings. So the basis for achieving distinctiveness, the basis for achieving sustainable strategic advantage as a business or as an individual, or indeed even as a nation, is shifting to what is now being referred to as dynamic intellectual capabilities. It is not about just scale or who has massive populations. That is the biggest error that people make. That might give you consumption if you've already got per capita GDP at the right levels. But true competitiveness, strategic advantage into the future, distinctiveness ultimately is about dynamic intellectual capabilities. Now, you might ask, what is that? But I'm coming to that. But before I say that, let me even go further. The truth also is that today, life and death of societies, of humans, is also now going to be determined, by this issue of distinctive, sustainable, competitiveness or intellectual dynamic capabilities. What do I mean? Look at what's going on with COVID, and look at what's going on with vaccines. Only a certain number of countries today were able to rapidly put together the necessary wherewithal, not to produce the vaccines, but to actually do the intellectual work to create a vaccine that has a chance, a high level of efficacy of anything between, as you can very well see, AstraZeneca's 62 to 90%, or Moderna's 95%, or Pfizer's 95%, or Sputnik 5, which is the Russian vaccine, at 92%. To get it to that level of efficacy and effectiveness at the shortest possible time to save human lives. To do that, what all these societies that have been able to achieve these vaccines have done is that they have tapped into the dynamic intellectual capabilities of their societies. If you do not have it going forward, it's not just about competitive advantage anymore. The way we're now realizing it, it is also about life and death. The fact that some countries have been able to start vaccination and take them to high numbers, and some are still waiting for those who have surpluses to give them the opportunity, is in many ways speaking to the reality of what it means to compete going forward. And that thing that we see happening in the world with respect to vaccines is happening also, and will happen also with respect to the way companies, teams, particularly marketing teams, ultimately have to play. Why? Because the game, which is called dynamic intellectual capability, is about learning, is all about who knows how to learn fast. At the heart of dynamic intellectual capability going forward is what is referred to as fast learning. See how fast we were able, certain societies, certain companies were able to pull out vaccines and execute what was necessary to commercialize or optimize or commercialize those ideas. That's exactly what we're talking about. The world has really changed, and this will start to become the new dynamic. So now more than ever in human history, the truth is that now more than ever in human history, individuals, teams, corporations, nations have to change the way they learn. And what this means for marketing and commercial leaders is that this new approach has to encompass what you might refer to as experiential learning, which is deployed across a range of foundational marketing functions, both in terms of the way in which we put in place learning processes for our marketing teams and the way in which we look out for the learning outcomes. Now, there is a lot to be done just thinking about this point. There's a lot to be said just thinking about this. So the way in which marketing teams learn has to change quickly. And here, what I have, can I just very quickly, if you don't mind, I normally stop on pause to get some verbal feedback. Is this clear? I hope I'm not on a lone walk. Am I still connected?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. All right. Just to make sure, because sometimes, I've had the experience of talking for about 30 minutes, only to find out I was cut off 30 minutes earlier. So once beaten, twice shy. Now, here you've got a slide that kind of connects with that conversation point I made about the way marketing teams learn has to change. To start off with, the pedagogical approach that we ultimately have used to train brand managers, marketing managers, account executives, and so on and so forth, has been very traditional. And, it's been kind of literally almost the same. But thinking, what is a pedagogy? It is the philosophy of the way in which they should learn. It is the philosophy of ultimately what it is that learning and knowledge and truth is. What does it really mean today when we talk about segmentation? What does it truly mean today when we're talking about this concept of strategic competitive advantage? Is that really, in fact, in itself, the key thing that we should be going after? Marketing sits on some particularly if you're in fast-moving consumer good marketing, it sits on some very, very fundamental, very conventional approaches over the years. Yes, digital marketing has changed and is changing some of that, but we still see some of those traditional factors there. The way in which learning systems are developed is to sit down in a classroom. Look at what's going on today. Everybody, just less than 2 years, and everybody now realizes that, wait a minute, we can do this thing virtually. And probably it makes more sense. So all sorts of learning systems are actually being developed. And therefore, what is your marketing team doing in building those systems? The way in which interdisciplinary or network learning, what does that mean? Are you thinking about learning from just marketing standpoint, your corporation standpoint, or actually doing joint learning to a certain degree, even with your competitor? Why? Because there are certain areas where the points of parity actually gives both of you, to a certain degree, some level of collaborative advantages. Now, that's not the right kind of thinking that most marketing managers have met. You don't even want to sit down in the same room with your competitor. Okay, how do we learn? Learning fast now means that we need to learn agile, learning agility. We have to actually learn leanly and not spend resources that we don't have. So what does it mean to put together lean learning for teams? Strategic thinking, we've talked about that. Facilitative and reflective leadership. And I'm so pleased and so grateful for the generosity that Stuart has offered in really probing some of the ways in which leadership really should be establishing itself. Ultimately, one of the most important things certainly happening today across business generally is this conversation around transformation. And therefore, to a large extent, equally, the truth is that what are you doing in terms of also transforming your leadership learning systems? In terms of outcomes, as you can see, there are a lot of things we should be thinking about as well. Environmental sensing, the way we sense the environment. Who would have told us 2 years ago that COVID would have done so much damage to the world, to businesses? Here in the UK, if with all the shock absorbers that this country has here in the UK, where I'm presently seated, so many businesses have suffered immense loss. A lot of value has been wiped away, because of something which nobody saw coming. What more of societies that do not have these types of institutional infrastructures that developed countries like the UK or the US have? Look at the US, even battling and struggling in itself. The way in which we segment, the way we put in segmentation is changing because one segment is no longer constant, and ultimately you can no longer hold a segmentation variable or moniker or as constant because the human being is changing its segmentation on an ongoing basis based on the reality of the dynamic life we live. So how do we start to think about that? Hyper-personalization. I just loved what Jeff Bezos said about experimentation. It really hit me hard when he said that about the nature. This is the nature of the man. He's not thinking of himself as a businessman. He actually thinks of himself as a scientist who is constantly experimenting. the way in which we look at what we refer to as communicative syntaxes. What are syntaxes? The language, the choice of words, the constructions of sentences. It's changing because of the nature of the devices, the nature of the channels we have to use. Algorithms today are ruling us. Fridges are making decisions on what should be stocked. And the woman who ultimately is the mother of the home really doesn't have that much power, so like sometimes anymore in certain societies, because Alexa does the rest of the work and immediately triggers an order. And whether we think, oh, this is so far Western, it's coming to all parts of the world. It's coming. I mean, Amazon is just setting up his regional office in South Africa. That tells you what is coming. Or, modeling and canvases. Marketing econometrics, which is about really being able to deliver. One of the biggest issues which I've had is that from an experiential standpoint is nobody truly in the experiential marketing community, for instance, can claim to truly have a proper way of campaign monitoring and evaluation. And so some of us have been working on that for the last 2.5 years, so that we can deliver a certain level of truth, to marketing campaign management and ultimately use that. But above all, I think one of the most important outcomes that needs to change is courage. And that speaks to the issue of what we call competency frameworks. Who currently has competency frameworks for the recruitment and the development of marketing teams, both at the client side and the agency side? And so a lot of, in Birmingham University in Birmingham, they've been doing a lot of work on this notion of courage and marketing. And how do we even know who is the right kind of person, courageous enough to and bold enough to take decisions going forward? My time is running out, but I'm coming to hopefully gradually coming to an end. Ultimately, the creation of a learning organization, as Peter Senge is perhaps the person who started this whole game. He says that it is where a learning organization is where people constantly and continually expand their capacity to create the results they truly desire, where new expansive patterns of thinking are nurtured, where collective aspiration is set free, and where people are constantly learning how to learn. And that should be the goal of anybody who leads a marketing team. So how do you then build a marketing learning organization? A marketing learning organization has to develop a high level of dynamic intellectual capability by connecting all the relevant value creation, value delivery, and value capture network partners in the service of a customer who collaborates with us to teach us how to serve them. And that means that there is work to be done across brand teams, sales teams, agency partners, customers themselves, and other internal as well as external stakeholders, all in the service, ultimately, of creating value for all stakeholders. And what you have there are a range of very important issues that you need to be aware of, and you need to start to make a plan towards. If today, for instance, you are responsible for building top-notch marketing teams, you need to be putting in place audits, competency, as well as capability mappings. You need to really ask pedagogical questions, as well as start the development of organizational curriculum for your teams. You need to be doing learner journey mapping. You need to be putting in place experiential learning, as well as channel development. You need to have a point of view with respect to EdTech, digital learning solutions provisions. How are we going to put in place content? And that means content planning, development, and deployment. How do we put in place personalization? And how do you build a learner relationship management system that ultimately keeps you at the top end of the relationship or the learning relationship with your audience or with your employees? And finally, how do you put in place the necessary periodic reviews and management controls to make all this happen? I will say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that to achieve that, you need to think about whether you are a future-proof leader across 5 very important parameters that have been, through research, has shown clearly is required to be a future-proof leader that is able to do this. And I will leave this later on so that you can kind of use these questions to reflect individually. What is the level of your learning agility? What's the level of your focused attention as an individual and as a team? What is the level of your lateral thinking as an individual, as a team? What is the level of the radical interdependence that you live by as an individual and as a team? And what's the systems thinking for you as an individual as well as you as a team? We want to help at Experiential NG. And I am so grateful to have the quality of minds as well as experience who've stepped forward to and agreed to be counted in offering the Nigerian marketing industry, particularly those in the marketing community and the service and allied community, some degree of support in this journey. And the way what we've done is we want to put together a battle on the strategic marketing leadership development accelerator. It is a program, but it is designed more like acceleration in the same way as new ventures and new organizations ultimately, or new companies form out themselves. Because in many ways, this is what it is. You're building dynamic intellectual capability, and therefore you need to move quickly to do that without a fuss. So this sits on three legs. One is the practical leadership, commercial leadership program. The second is this strategic marketing program or thinking program. And the third is this more work to be done in this whole area of how do you help you build a marketing-led organization or a marketing team learning organization. So this issue of reflective practice and the experiential learning organization. Now, as you can see, I'm grateful to Stuart Hamilton, who is the director of Breakthrough Scotland and a man of immense experience, and who, by the way, I've known for about 20 years. We were surprised when we kind of realized that, it's 20 years ago we started our conversation, and who is someone who I'm really grateful for support and for the conversations over the years. And Stuart is an excellent resource person and is so passionate about this, helping to build, help teams break through and help small and medium organizations as well as large organizations actually break through. And so here you've got the range of modules which he kind of offered in terms of his program, and he course directs that, and we work with him on that. Austin Ofumba, who is also was very generous with his time and his experience and his passion for strategic thinking, and again, in making the choice, I will confess, I thought hard about this and wanted to go with people who, over the years, I knew that there's a level of passion and of course commitment to the exploration of this agenda. Austin, I've worked with as a critical friend, and this is maybe one of the most important issues. The conversation really that good marketing directors should have with heads of agencies should be about critical friendships. Probing, questioning, debating, arguing, and sometimes even fighting, all in the service of the brand. Other things can follow later. And that has been the relationship that I've had, and I had great privilege to work with him over the years in some very, very outstanding projects. But more importantly, I understand the quality of his thinking in terms, and indeed, the two companies that he worked for at that level clearly also did. So he offers us that. And then finally, as I said, I come in to support in the area of helping managers here, marketing managers, heads of marketing who are ready to embed all this. A lot of the work here is kind of, in this part of it is a bit more consulting type, more bespoke. I'll give you a case in point. How have we thought about developing customer education programs? You need to be training your customer as well. And now that typically is done in IT companies with things like the customer success manager, white papers, training programs for user training and so on and so forth. And by the way, just to say, I just reminded myself, Stuart, you and I did that almost 20 years ago, basically working through training, IT platforms and so on and so forth. Action research that helps you to improve your marketing process is part of what needs to be done if you truly want to be an experiential learning, experiential marketing learning organization. There are other things as well, such as competency frameworks and capability mapping. I will say this point blank because I used to be the vice president of the National Institute of Marketing of Nigeria. The Nigerian marketing industry, for raw and profession, for all the years that we have done great work, does not have a universal competency framework. And I will be the first to say it's a disgrace to us, me inclusive. And it is way overdue. And how do you then put together learning journeys if you don't, for instance, have competency frameworks that we want to use as an industry? Because competency frameworks need to also be culturally aligned to the nation in question. For one thing, trade marketing in the United Kingdom is not the same way you do trade marketing in Nigeria. So you cannot take a UK model and just ram it through the mouths or the throats of people. We have to do the work. And so some of us are trying to make the commitment to do these types of things in the service of our industry and in the service of our profession. But we need help. We cannot do this if we do not get the support of people on the client side, as always. Those who are truly driven to a higher level of what the practice can be. And so what we offer is this in terms of a startup, the Strategic Marketing Leadership Development Accelerator in association with Breakthrough Scotland Leadership Education. I'm grateful for Stuart's approval and agreement to do this. And in a nutshell, this is what the promissory note is by way of a value proposition. It's 90 days worth of training. It is online, it is self-paced, but it is experiential executive learning, 18 modules in all, 12 premium case studies, international coaching over Zoom, business simulation games, all made available for particularly for leaders in marketing today, in both the client and agency side, but more importantly, for leaders in training. In other words, you developing the next set of people who ultimately will take your business and your brands and your value propositions to the next level. So this is in a nutshell where we are hoping to go. I'm more than happy to basically answer any questions if they are so. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you.